Welcome to the Panic Room, where we talk about all things panic-inducing. I am the Queen of Panic. Warning, some episodes may contain content that may be disturbing to others. Viewer discretion is advised. Now let the games begin.
So when I was about 15 to 17, I babysat a lot. I babysat for the sweetest little girl. She was always well behaved, wasn't picky, slept well, and would play quietly and nicely. Basically, a babysitter's dream. This was all up until she turned 5. She started to act really weird. She would act out, hit, bite, throw her food. She basically became a totally different child. One night, I was called by her mom to babysit overnight. Despite the changes the girl seemed to be going through right now, I of course said yes, as I had been babysitting this little girl for 3 years by now. I figured she was of course just going through a phase. The night started out okay. She was like her normal self. Around 8 that night, she was sleepy and went to her room. A little later on, I had to go to the bathroom. On my way there, I heard her crying and talking to someone. I peeked in her room and no one was there. But I don't want to hurt her. She's really nice and takes care of me. I wanted to run. I had no idea who or what she was talking to. Instead, I asked her, "Sweetheart, are you okay? I heard you crying. What's wrong?" What she told me made my blood run cold. My imaginary friend isn't nice. She told me if I want to stay friends with her, I have to stab you. I don't want to do that, though. I immediately called her parents saying I was sick and needed to go home. Luckily, that was the last night I was ever going to watch her, though, as the next week they had planned to move to Florida. It was probably the creepiest thing a child has ever said to me, and I have dealt with some pretty creepy children. This is something that happened this past Friday while I was babysitting. For a little bit of context, I'm 21 female, a college student, and have been babysitting since I was 14. I am not an expert on literally anything. However, over the years, I have learned caution and resilience. At age 15, I took babysitting classes at our youth center, as well as a female self-defense course. So I babysat at least once a month for this one family. I like them because they pay me more than my usually hourly rate. They have a big house with internet that I can use to do homework, and the 2 kids are surprisingly well behaved and compliant. So the 2 parents have a monthly ritual of going out around 5 p.m. and returning a little after 2 a.m. I'm always offered to sleep in the guest bedroom and stay until morning. I usually just stay awake and abuse their satellite TV and then leave when they come back. The house is in a nice neighborhood without a whole lot of neighbors. Very quiet. Also, their house is armed with an alarm system that I have the code to and can arm and disarm through my phone. That'll be relevant in a little while. So I always take them for pizza at this place that has like an arcade. I do this so they tire themselves out and go to bed early. Plus the little girl that I babysat is also on a mission to win a family of stuffed animals from the prize store. So I'd be the world's worst babysitter if I didn't guide her in the pursuit. I was sitting at a table and watching them play in a ball pit, while also texting on my phone. This couple came over and sat at the same table as me. It was a long table with parents scattered here and there, so this wasn't alarming. The couple looked normal enough. Both were probably in their mid-20s, possibly a little older. They talked to each other, but then the guy asked me, "Are you the one babysitting Dr. So-and-so's kids?" So the parents of these children are both doctors, and the specific region that we live in, this would be common enough information, but I still chose to answer the question with an irrelevant statement. "I wonder what they used to make the pizza here." Yeah, I know, I'm a master of deception. I deserve an Oscar for my performance. However, they seemed to see right through my clever ruse. They started making weird comments. They talked about the kids' parents. They commented on the daughter and how they wondered if she would look as pretty as their mom. Okay, my dudes, I don't know if that was intended to be creepy, but I'm just going to be safe and pretend it was. Then the woman says to me, and I quote, "Do they really let you dress like that while watching their kids?" She motioned with her eyes towards my t-shirt, which was admittedly a little tight, though, aside from a little of a bosom crack, not revealing. I have a thin frame and a large chest. It's 90 degrees in my region of the US right now, so it's not like I can wear a hoodie, and I'm not able to comfortably wear shirts with buttons. I saw that as my cue to go and get the kiddos and bring them to get their prizes so we could bounce. After some very thought-provoking and psychological debating, they both got their prizes and we headed back over to their house. So fast forward a few hours, both kids were bathed and put to sleep. I delivered a heartwarming rendition of Goodnight Moon and read a very spooky chapter of the Werewolf Fever Swamp and tucked them into dreamland. It was around 9 p.m. I was caught up on homework and was just watching TV when I heard some movement on the porch. I didn't think much of it at first, but the doorknob started rattling violently. I initially started moving towards the front door to see who it was, but miraculously I remembered that it was late at night. I was home alone with 2 kids, and I very much wanted to live. I turned around to grab my purse, which is where I kept my taser. As I'm moving, the back door starts rattling as well, and was accompanied by some banging noises. That's when I remembered that I hadn't enabled the alarm system after returning. Now, if this was a horror movie scenario, of course the alarm wouldn't have worked, and the intruders would have made their way inside. I hate to disappoint, if you were expecting something more exciting, but I enabled it again quite easily with no incident. I ran upstairs and grabbed the 2 kids. I put them in their parents' room and walked in the closet. I still hate that I scared them. When I gathered them up, I gave no context as to what was going on. I didn't want to tell them that someone was trying to break in the house, but in the process, the fear of not knowing seemed to be worse. I instructed them to stay in there and stay quiet, and only to open the door if they heard me talking to them. I then locked the bedroom door, which is the only door on the upstairs floor that locks. I sat there with my taser out and hit the panic button on the phone app. Several minutes went by. Then I got the notification through the app that the alarm system was disabled. I planned on calling 911, even though the panic button already took care of that, but I found it more beneficial to arm it back. Then it disarmed again, so I armed it again. Then it disarmed once again, so I armed it once again. By this time, I could hear what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps walking up the stairs. Good job, girl, you locked yourself inside with 2 potential assailants. I was holding it together for the sake of the kids, but not deep inside. I was scared to death. When I heard the footsteps get near the door, I saw the knob twisting. I took a deep breath and I pulled the trigger on my taser just to let them know that I was armed, though it realistically wouldn't do much good. I informed them through the door that the alarm was triggered and police were on their way. Thankfully, I was greeted by a familiar voice. My name, it's Doctor, his name. You're safe. I opened the door and ran into their arms and started sobbing. I hadn't realized truly until it was over just how scared I really was. The kids came out without me giving them the okay, but their parents were there, so I'll let it slide. When I enabled the alarm on my phone, they both got the notification from the place that they were at. With the app, you have the option to view the porch cameras as well. When they got the notification that the panic button was activated, they saw through the camera that there were people on each side of the house. 1 man, 1 woman. When the alarm kept disarming, that was them trying to get into the house. Police report was filed by them and gave a statement mentioning the 2 weirdos I met earlier that day. Even though there was really no evidence that would directly point to them, camera footage didn't give any positive face IDs either. So yeah, I was scared. I'm getting over it now. I'm just grateful that the couple that I was babysitting for were close enough to make it to me. I hate to say it, but I find the police response time to be terrible. I'm currently back in my own apartment an hour away. I checked in once to see how the kids were doing, and they're holding up fine. I'm just glad they had proper protection in their home, and that this didn't end up to be way worse. My mom used to be friends with a lady who had 4 kids, 3 boys and a daughter. When I was around 15 or 16, I used to babysit for them fairly often. On this night in particular, the boys had a sports game to go to, and the little girl, who was around 7 or 8 at the time, let's call her Abby, was in need of a fun girls' day, so my younger sister and I offered to babysit for her at my mom's house. In my mom's neighborhood, there was a park just a couple blocks down the road, and Abby was begging us to take her there, so since it was a nice day and there was still a few hours of daylight left, we obliged. Sometime after we got to the park, I was starting to get things picked up so we could head back home since it would be getting dark before long. That's when I noticed a little girl who appeared to be around Abby's age walking towards the playground. She was alone, albeit the small dog she was walking, whose off-white fur was noticeably dirty and matted. As soon as she approached the park, she walked right to me without hesitation, and with a toothy grin, she asked me to play with her. I couldn't explain it, but I sensed something was off, so I urged my younger sister to take Abby over to the swing set while I talked to the little girl, and passed a ball we had brought back and forth with her. She was barefoot, and her clothes were ill-fitting and faded. She had faint scuffs and bruises on her legs, which were very thin even for such a young girl. That weird gut feeling I had gotten initially only grew stronger as I talked to her, and after a moment of passing the ball back and forth, I asked her if her parents knew where she was, and if she was allowed to be at the park alone, stuff like that. She gave me an eerily scripted response. By this time, I began to get the feeling something was really wrong, and it wasn't in my head. And judging by the looks my sister was giving me from across the park, she thought something was off too. I began to ask the little girl if she was safe and if everything was okay. She kept saying the same things again and again, with a certain clarity that wasn't there when she was talking about random things, like her puppy or what her favorite color was. It sounded rehearsed and monotone, like she was reading the words she spoke. I'm safe. My parents know where I am. Everything is okay. So I dropped it. Just minutes had passed since she had initially approached me, before she began to tell me it was time for her to go home now, and asking me if I'd walk with her. I asked her where to, and she pointed across a field with a plethora of tall grass and no real development for several blocks. The only thing across it was a small parking lot shaded by trees, connected to a now empty dog park. My heart sank. I politely declined, but she was very persistent that I walk with her, keeping a big smile on her face throughout the entire interaction. She even grabbed at my hand several times to try and lead me away. The thought of leaving that little girl there alone made me feel awful, but I wasn't going to leave Abby and my sister at the park alone, especially now that it was getting dark. Eventually, the little girl stopped pressing the issue and said goodbye to me before she began to walk away. Yet she didn't walk in the direction that she had pointed to earlier. She walked in the opposite direction entirely. I waited until the little girl was out of my line of sight completely before I hurriedly got my sister and Abby, and we left without a second thought. I could see the concern on my sister's face, but we both knew the time to talk about it wasn't with Abby around. For reference, when you're at the playground, you can't see the parking lot across the field of tall grass. Yet, the sidewalk leading to the playground is on a hill, and when you reach the top of it, you can just barely see the parking lot across the field. I made the mistake of looking behind me as we exited the park, and as I did, I could just barely see the top of a car with its overhead lights on. Needless to say, I walked a little faster when I saw that. Could be totally unrelated, but the fact that that little girl was pointing in the direction on a single idling car in a tiny and heavily shaded parking lot made my heart beat a little faster. We got home just fine and spent the rest of the night until Abby's mom came to pick her up, doing crafts and watching cartoons. But I was left with so many questions about what had happened at the park. What was this little girl doing at the park all by herself? Why did she only approach me and not Abby, who was her age, to play with her? Why was she so persistent in getting me, and only me, to walk away with her? Why was she trying to lead me towards the field when she left going the opposite direction? Could this be a trafficking front, or am I just being paranoid? It's been over 3 years, and this experience has stuck with me. Before I start, I must say I haven't told many people this, mostly because it's a very scary experience for me. This happened in Kelowna, Canada in the 80s. I was about 14 and was babysitting at a neighbor's house while the parents were gone. They had a nice house, like most in the neighborhood, and it was right on the corner where 2 streets connected. My house was right outside a bus stop across from theirs. This happened pretty late night in the winter, so it was dark out, maybe 11 or 12 at night. I was sitting on the couch when I thought I saw something out the back door. It was one of those glass doors that led to the porch. It was weird though because I couldn't see much. You know when the lights are on and it's dark out so you can't see anything but black in your reflection? That's what I saw. But I could have sworn it looked like something was there. So I got up and walked close to the window. It definitely looked like something was there, but I couldn't see still. I got closer. Still couldn't see. I honestly should have just turned on the lights, but instead I put my face right to the glass and cut my hands by my eyes to look out. Maybe about 1 inch from my face and on the other side of the glass was a man. He looked tall and pale from what I could see, which wasn't much, and he was staring at me very scarily. Keep in mind, he would have had to been watching from the backyard. Naturally, I jumped back and let out a short scream, but stupid teenager me didn't call the cops. I called my parents instead. My father came over to take a look. There were still footprints in the front and backyard. I don't remember much after that because it just felt like a very unreal experience. You never expect this stuff to happen to you until it does. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the story because I sure didn't enjoy experiencing it. Trigger warning. Description of domestic violence. Years ago, I pushed really hard to make sure my daughter got a cell phone at a pretty early age, around 12. My former spouse did not really understand why this was such a big deal to me. I could not really explain it at the time, but I had a reason why I needed her to have a phone, and part of it was from my own experience as a young 14-year-old babysitter. I loved babysitting for Jack and Diane. Not only were they the coolest couple ever, but their kids were sweet and so fun. They had a little toddler boy, Matt, and John, the baby. Jack was a biker, and he often picked me up on his Harley, which was the most amazing thing ever, and his wife loaned me a lot of leather clothes to wear to rock concerts. They went out partying a lot and paid well. It was like a dream job. They were out clubbing that night. I had put Matt to bed and rocked John off to sleep. It was a cold night, so they had taken the Mercedes instead of the bike. It was so late, even with checking on the sleeping kids regularly. I was getting sleepy. It was never an issue. They did not mind at all if I dozed off to sleep, which I did this night. I woke up with a start, heart pounding. I have no idea what woke me up. Neither kid woke up, and there was no noise. But for whatever reason, I was wide awake and terrified. I had just gotten my panic under control when I heard a car door slam shut. I looked out the window and saw they were home, so I went to the front door. Diane came in, and one side of her face was horribly swollen and she was bleeding. Stupidly, I asked, "Did you get into a fight?" She raced past me to the phone at the dining room table and started dialing. It was an old tabletop-style phone. Jack came in next, flying past me and screaming. He grabbed the heavy phone receiver from her hand and bashed the side of her head. Blood spattered across the wall. He ripped the phone from the wall. She screamed back, holding her very bloody face. He smashed her head into the wall, and then she staggered, gushing blood into the bedroom, out of sight. I heard more screaming and ugly sounds of blows landing when she came tumbling out of the bedroom, thrown through a hallway into the crib, waking John. She crawled out of the room as he cried, and Jack dragged her into the hallway and screamed at the baby to shut up. I was terrified and did not know what to do, so I went and grabbed the baby, cuddling him and turning him away from the image of his dad, straddling his mom and choking her. The silence as he settled was almost scarier than the screaming. Was she dead? I got John settled again and came back out into the living room. I did not know what to do. Diane lay on the floor, broken, bleeding, barely recognizable, but somehow still breathing. Jack told me to sit down as he dialed a number on his cell phone. I slowly perched on the edge of the couch. Diane crawled to me then, gurgling words past the blood. She begged me to protect her babies. I just kept thinking that I was just a kid too. Soon a bunch of Jack's buddies were there. A few of them said that they would take Diane to the hospital. Jack asked if I would stay with the kids. Diane started screaming if I stayed, he would rape and kill me. I said I just wanted to go home. One of the guys said he would call his wife to stay with the kids. They left with Diane. Jack looked at me and told me to get in the car. He would take me home. I had no way to call for help or a different ride. The whole way home, I just tried to stay calm. The turn to my street was at the bottom of a dip. We approached the turn as Jack kept telling me how he did not want to go back to prison. How he would do anything to not go back to prison. I kept nodding and agreeing as he took his foot off the brake and drove past the turn. I looked at him, horrified. I just want to talk. I need to calm down before I go home to my kids, okay? We ended up at an all-night donut shop. He had a coffee and donut, got me something, and spent more than the next hour telling me how he was not a bad guy. Prison had changed him. I was less than 5 kilometers from my home, but no way to call for help, and no one knew where I was. I just tried to be supportive and agreed with everything he said. He paid me $50, which was a lot for back then. Finally, we got back into the car and he drove me home. It was one of the longest nights ever. I woke up to a police cruiser outside my house. Diane refused to press charges. About a week later, I got a letter from her, apologizing for everything, taking all of the blame. Sometimes I wonder if she left before he killed her. I wonder if those sweet kids grew up to be good people. So that is one reason why I made sure my daughter had a way to call for help. When I was 15, I found a job at a local newspaper for a live-in babysitter. It was summer and I wanted to make some money. I lived in a rural area and did not have transportation to get to a mall or fast food place to work, the usual jobs for teens. There was no public transportation where I lived and no jobs in the rural town I lived in. I called the number for the live-in babysitting job and a man answered. I found out that he was a divorced man with 2 young children. They were school age, elementary school, and were home for the summer vacation, and he needed someone to watch them while he was at work. He spoke to my mother on the phone and she agreed to allow me to do the live-in job. As an adult, I questioned so many of her decisions and certainly this one. He picked me up and drove me to his house, and while driving he told me that he was engaged. He said that his fiancée was his former babysitter and she was a few years older than I was. As a 15-year-old, this did not set off any alarm bells. I just thought it was weird that someone my age would want to be with an old man. He was probably in his late 30s to mid-40s. I thought it was weird when I was taking the children for a walk, and a woman who lived in the neighborhood looked at me in an odd way, like something was wrong about me walking those children. And when I smiled and waved, she just looked away and ignored me. I didn't give it a lot of thought, though. It just seemed strange. The house was a split-level home, a style where the floor levels were split. The main living area and the bedrooms were on the top level, and the lower level had just a living room area and a single bedroom. That was my assigned room. Not long after I began living in the home to babysit for this guy, he knocked on my bedroom door after I'd gone to bed. I was kind of freaked out by this, and I opened the door partially to ask what he wanted. He acted all friendly and asked me if I wanted a beer, like he was cool with that. I simply said no, and waited for him to leave and shut the door. The next day I told him that I no longer wanted to do the job, and had him take me back home. I didn't fully understand at the time that he was a predator who was trying to groom me into having a relationship with him, but I knew enough that something was just not right about the situation, and that he was creepy, and something told me to get out of there. A few years back, I was a daycare teacher and was asked to babysit for one of my students. I said yes because I got along well with the family, and their child was a sweetheart. When I got to their house, the mom gave me a tour so I would know where everything was, what was off limits to the child, etc. The whole time this was happening, the dad was hanging back but following us. When it was time for the parents to go out for that evening, their child started crying, being 2 at the time. They understandably wanted mommy and daddy, but I was quickly able to distract them, and within a few minutes, we were playing with Play-Doh and all was well. The parents said bye to us and told me that they'd be home within 3 hours. I heard them close the garage door when they left, and nothing was out of the ordinary. The child was happy, we were playing, I made him a snack, and we were having a generally good time. About an hour later, I am scared to death when we hear the door that leads in from the garage to the laundry room, not the actual garage door I heard when they left, open. It was the dad. I was so startled and asked if everything was okay. He said yes and just stared at me. I asked where his wife was, and he said she was still out. By this time, the child had run over to him, and my gut was saying to leave. So I asked if it was alright if I got going since he was home. He said yes, and so I grabbed my keys and got out of there, with the most uneasy feeling hanging over me. When I saw them at daycare the following week, Mom was nice to me still but seemed embarrassed or something, and Dad was just really weird and rarely came to pick up his child again. Years later, this thought was still with me. Did he ever leave with his wife that night? Was he in the garage the entire time? Because I didn't hear the garage door go up when just he came back alone. Not sure what exactly this was all about, but I never babysat for them again. When I turned 11, I started babysitting my nieces and nephews because I was finally old enough. I had been babysitting for about 4 years when this happened. I was about 15 at the time, and my sister worked early mornings, so she had asked me to stay the night to babysit for her. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, so my mom would let me take hers just in case. I babysat 2 boys. One was about 8 at the time, I'll call him D, and the other one was between 3 and 4, I'll call him M. My sister lived at a not-so-great part of town, so I'd always keep the doors locked up tight. Plus, I'd like to listen to scary stories, and I was super into true crime, so I was a pretty paranoid kid. There was a pretty large apartment complex next to my sister's house, and it had some pretty sketchy people there. But they had a pretty nice playground and a basketball court right outside the house, and we went to play there a lot. On this particular day, though, I had just woken up, and I was making French toast for my 2 nephews. I was listening to music with my earbuds because they were still sleeping, but I knew that they'd be up soon. You know when you have music in your ears, how sometimes it sounds like someone is calling you, or you think you hear something. Well, I kept hearing noises, and I kept pulling my earbuds out to listen, but the noises would stop. I did that about a dozen times before eventually chalking it up to my imagination. About the time I was finishing up the French toast, my nephews came out of the room and into the kitchen ready to eat. I saw my younger nephew in his booster chair and started cutting pieces up for him to eat, while my older nephew was sitting at the table with a plate full of French toast. We turned on the XM radio and started playing some kids' music while eating. I thought I was hearing noises again, but I kinda tuned them out. We finally finished eating, and I put the dishes in the sink and got the kids dressed. They were begging to go to the playground, so I gave in and said sure. As I was getting dressed, I heard a loud crack. I jumped and ran out of the room pretty freaked out, and I went to check on the boys. D came out of his room with M in his arms. I looked at D and said, "Did you break something?" He shook his head and looked absolutely petrified. I told the boys to stay in the hallway, since there were no windows and I wasn't really sure what was going on. I started to walk around the house to see if something had fallen, but nothing looked out of place. I saw a shadow peeking in through the front door. The door had an oval glass pane, but it was difficult to see in unless you have your hands cupping your face, while pressed against the window. I couldn't see his face, but he was in all black and he had black gloves on. I was standing to the side so he couldn't see me. He looked around for a minute or two until he ran around the house again. I quietly ran back into the hallway and shoved my nephews into the bathroom and whispered, "Lock the door behind you." He was panicked and confused, but I didn't have a phone with me. I had to go back to the kitchen to get it. He closed and locked the door, and I ran back out to grab my mom's phone. I heard glass cracking again, and I started to lose my shit. I started crying and shaking, and I called my sister. I don't really know why, but I called her, and I told her that someone was trying to break in the house. She freaked out and told me I needed to call the cops. I told her I was scared and I didn't want to hang up. I finally did and called the police. I was still in the kitchen and saw another man run across the backyard. I was sobbing and shaking, and the police weren't being quick enough. After asking my address and the necessary questions, they told me to stay on the line, and they were sending someone out. It felt like it took forever, but finally a cop car drove around the neighborhood and said we were fine. I told them that there were 2 men outside trying to get in, so they got out of their cars and looked around the house. They went to the side and I heard the giant crack, and they saw that one of the windows was shattered and another was cracked. They were definitely trying to get in, but I don't know what they were planning on doing. There was a giant bed frame in front of the 2 broken windows. I think if it wasn't there, I would probably not be telling this story. They never caught the men that were trying to get in, but I hope I'm never in a situation like that again. If you would like to submit your stories, please check out the Panic Within subreddit. I go over those stories that are submitted, and I go ahead and I narrate them. I say go over, but I narrate all of them. So if you are interested in something like that, go ahead and take a look in the description, and you'll find the link there. We also have a Discord. You can come and hang out and get spooky with me and other narrators. We post new content, up-and-coming videos, promotions, and we also just hang out and chat, and you can come and hang out with us there. If you're interested in that, link is also in the description below. And last but not least, if you are interested in doing a collab with the King of Panic or myself, you can absolutely reach out. If you're another creator, you can do one on our channel, we can do one with you. We are completely open for collab as of right now. Looking for new stuff to do and very excited for anybody who reaches out. The best way to do that is through Twitter or Discord. I do check Instagram and I will get back. It just might take a little longer because I'm super bad at that, but I've been trying to be better. So if you do reach out there, even if it takes a couple days, I'll be there. But like I said, we're excited. So please definitely reach out and we're looking forward to it. And as always, thank you for visiting the Panic Room. You have successfully made it to the next portion of your tour. Please stay tuned for your next prompt. Click the like button and subscribe to receive notifications for when the next portion of your tour is ready to join. Thank you for watching. Don't let the panic drown you.